I believe Concord was a good game. Not because, well, the product itself was really that good. It was initially shit. What was good about the game was the ripple effect it sent across, gaming, but entertainment as a whole. That if you have a product that's literally not for the people to consume, and you spend, well, according to this, 400 million on a game that was actively hostile, on a studio with developers that are actively hostile against gamers. And to Sony's credit, they did reimburse what, the 80 people probably still fucking playing that game. Well, no, they reimbursed, because I'm pretty sure of the 600 people that actually picked it up, maybe assuming only 100 of them refunded that schlop, they repaid everybody back, which you don't usually see. Usually, what happens is the game goes free to play. So if you paid for the game initially, you've effectively got scammed. But no, to Sony's credit, the they paid them back. I barely watch things on X because you're playing Russian roulette. Like, maybe titties might show up, but let's give this a good old watch.
I want to talk about Concord. I wasn't going to ever talk about this game again because who really gives a shit? However,
Everyone, like I said, it should be an Olympic sport to shit on bad products and bad games. You should get more entertainment. There's more entertainment in shitting on Concord than people would have ever gotten actually playing the game. And Concord, again, is just this blaring beacon of, okay, if you have a game that's not for gamers, it's just shit. Like what Asmongold says, but I'm gonna take full responsibility for this, and I'm gonna use this as, a product is like layers on an onion, and a good onion has layers of quality, where a bad onion has layers and layers of garbage. So if you have a bad product, people seeing things that look bad, like the characters or like the gameplay or like the mechanics, and if you just peel back just the fact that it was a had bad design, you find that, oh, okay, so it cost $400 million to make that schlop. The devs are actively hostile towards its consumers. They probably got paid government grants, right? It's just all you need to do is peel back, and I've gotten to this point where I could determine a bad game just within 2-3 minutes. Like Dragon Age Velgard is going to be a shitty game, and I'm gonna make a video on why. But yeah, like on the surface, it's just a vapid, poor game. But if you just peel all that back, you get even more shit.
and I don't do journalism really anymore, as you guys know, and we talk
Yeah,
about this a
nobody
lot.
does.
I was a journalist at one time, and I used to break a lot of stories, and these days I don't really grind like that. So the stories that I break these days are usually people, always, not usually, always people coming to me. And someone who worked on Concord reached out to me, and I verified who this person was and went through all of that and talked to this person extensively, for a long time. And got some, I think, interesting information that I can share about Concord. And I think people will be interested about it. The reason that I wanted to talk about it is because some of the assumptions that I had made about the game were dead wrong, as far as how much it cost and how much Sony really lost on it. So the big thing that you really need to know here about this is that Concord cost about $400 million to me.
Yeah, and that's the problem. It's like you wouldn't think that a game like Concord, which was effectively shovelware. Like, I thought the game was just shovelware until you see, oh wow, Sony themselves, it's a Sony product. But it was like, okay, it was 8 years in the development, right? And they probably had their consultants, which cost a hell of a lot of money. You know, they probably Sony gave them gave them the money, or well, they bought out the studio, Firewatch or whatever studio, and the incentive, at least the way I was told, is to spend more and more and more money because then you can write more and more and more of it off as losses in your taxes. And then you can just demand even more and more and more money. This is why you have overbloated companies spending hundreds of millions of dollars. And yeah, you can scream conspiracy theory, but conspiracy, like when interests converge, there's just no need for a conspiracy. Like the interest is to spend more and more and more money, even if you don't really need to. It's to pay the leeches, right? Because again, you write it off in taxes, you get even more government grants, you can demand even more money from the consumer. Like this it just makes sense. And if you're a multi-billion-dollar company like Sony, you can do this.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
And the story goes that Concord, by the time Concord was, so in the first quarter of 2023, Concord had basically entered an alpha state. This was before Sony had even purchased the team, but Sony had been working with Probably Monsters, and which was the original owner of Firewalk and Firewalk, probably since late 2020, maybe 2021 at the latest, on Concord. The game was in development before that. Up to the point that the game went into alpha state, they had already spent about $200 million on it. And it's unclear how much of that money is from Probably Monsters and the original investors into the game, and how much of that money was from Sony. There's this term in product development, not only with games, but really with everything. You can like manufacture a tchotchke. You guys might have heard of it. It's called minimum viability, or a minimum viable product. The idea behind this, or MVP, the idea behind this is that this is like what you're trying to achieve, and it's like once you cross this barrier, you feel comfortable selling it. It's not that it's the best it can be, or that it's what it's going to be by the time you launch it, because there's all sorts of extra stuff you do to it, but like, this is the minimum viability of the product. When the game had already had $200 million spent on it and was basically in an alpha form in quarter one of 2023, from that point until the game launched, Sony spent another $200 million on it.
Yeah, the way I see probably what happened, the way I see it is you got the some cost fallacy. They're like, okay, we already spent this much money. Let's just keep going and spending even more money just to hope and pray that the product's better. But again, it's like they're dumping money into it, but the devs and the art style and everything around it is still garbage. Like they hired consultants, they hired ideological individuals that actively wanted to make a worse product. And they're like, oh, throw more money. It's like, okay, you throw more money into it, and it doesn't really change anything. Like, $400 million for what? A rip off, like the exact opposite of Overwatch 1. Every single mechanic, every single art style, everything was just the exact opposite. The character design, like, right? It was just the exact, and they made these artistic decisions on purpose for a reason. They made the characters purposefully ugly, right? And just throwing money into it wasn't going to change that. So,
The scuttlebutt behind the scenes about Concord is that the game was in a laughable shape when it was shown, and basically like when the alpha was ready to go, and they were kind of being like, you know, we're ready to kind of get moving towards getting this thing out in the next year or two. It was in such horrible shape that Sony felt like they needed to spend that much money again, so 200 plus 200 to get the game to the MVP status, not to the status of it being like a great game, to get it to just viability. And that at that time in Q1 2023, there was nothing done. Like, a major expense was having to urgently outsource much of the game to other studios.
So, hold on. Let me get this straight. So they spent that much money only to not even do it at the company, to effectively outsource it to other studios to get it done. What fucking other studios? So 400 million and you couldn't even do it in house. Wow, that's okay.
To finish building the game out. And that two fundamental things were not worked on at all up to the point in which the game was shown in alpha. Onboarding, nothing about that. No, like, there was nothing about how players get on, like how they make their character, all that kind of stuff, or choose their character and get there. And monetization. Two very expensive, very specific and boutique things that happen to games like this. And so that's the first thing that I wanted to say, is that it's not only about the ongoing cost, which would be in the millions to keep the game going per month, but that the game cost about $400 million to make, soup to nuts. Sony put most of that money in, and it is not only so, because we had kind of said, like, this must be Sony's biggest loss ever on a game, and it is. It's the biggest game Sony's ever released from a budgetary standpoint, from the first party or second party. So let that sink in.
It's crazy.
And it's totally unintuitive.
Yeah, I heard there was a Bloodborne fan. It's like a fan redux, right? Fan remake coming out. Like, Sony has good IPs. It makes no. And again, what I heard was it was supposed to rival most other sci-fi projects, or at least that is what's the purpose of it, and it did literally the exact opposite, right? And you see that and you're like, okay, so what's the end goal? Well, I don't know what their end goal is. You don't know. Sony doesn't know. I guess the point was to just pump out a product to compete, but they ain't competing with shit. Like, their competitors are absolutely blowing them out the fucking water. Like, who are they trying to compete with? Well, why put this out? I don't know. They don't know. You don't know. But for some reason, they spent the hundreds of millions of dollars to try to push it anyway. And that's just something I don't understand. Again, I respect Sony. Well, I mean, I don't respect Sony. I mean, they did the bare fucking minimum. I don't think people should be fucking for a company for doing the bare fucking minimum and knowing, oh, okay, this product is garbage. Here's your money back. Forget we ever did this. But I doubt other companies are going to do that. Again, what most companies do is just make it a free product, and I guess people shut the hell up about it. But again, Concord was just this beautiful gem because it proved everything that, well, I thought, but I mean, I never really had any well, there are evidence of games not being for gamers, right? But you could always chalk those up to upper management decisions and the consultants, right? But it seems just across the industry that the point is not to cater to gamers anymore. Like, they don't want you, the person that plays the game. They don't really care if you enjoy the product, right? Again, they want to be this corporate ideological class that just exists and sucks up government money And again, in the case of Concord, like there was major backlash because I mean Concord's not the only uh, case of this happening, but it is the most apparent. I mean, you had Duskborn, which was effectively a rant. And again, you see this, and it's like, okay, so what's the end goal? And I guess there is no end goal, right? I mean, apparently not.
There are games that are in development right now at Sony first and second party that are more expensive than this. But as of the games that have come out so far, so think about like Spider-Man 2 and so on and so forth. We know The Last of Us Part 2 cost $220 million. Spider-Man 3 is going to cost about $350 million. This game costs more than that.
And they spent a lot of money just to try to put it in a functional state, right?
Because they made no money. They made about $1 million gross revenue, and then they gave it all back. So this is a huge, multiple hundreds of millions of dollar loss. Now the question is, why? Why did this happen? This game was heavily championed behind the scenes. Now we know this because Sony ended up, what's funny is that the game is presented in Q1 2023 as this, you know, we're kind of getting towards the end. The game is nowhere near being done. It's in a horrible position. And then Sony buys the team. The idea behind this was, and the term apparently verbatim had been used, that Concord is the future of PlayStation.
Yeah.
That they had such major ambition for this game that it was referred to internally as a Star Wars-like project for Sony.
Yeah, they wanted to make it into that quadruple A game, you know, and I hate using the term, right, but we really lack any other way of describing it. They wanted to make it a game that costs even more money. They pour just more and more money into it and get some level of infinite payback. And again, what it says on paper and what's happening in reality. In reality, what the market needs is not yet another, you know, quadruple A live service, not another remake, a remaster, a prequel, a sequel, not another Star Wars bullshit. They want small, concise, indie, tiny projects. Like, the market didn't need yet another hero shooter with vapid character design. I mean, you had, what was that one that Valve came out with? I can't remember the name, but again, it does the opposite, and it's still, you know, it's playable because, again, Valve made it, and it actually has appealing characters, and people are playing it, but Concord just was not it, Chief.
That it can be repeatedly revisited over and over and over again, not only in cross-media, but in what we were seeing. We've already kind of seen little bits of it. So the weekly story vignettes that they were going to release, and then, of course, the inclusion in Amazon's Secret Levels anthology, that's like just scratching the surface of it. Ironically, the game was codenamed Chaos behind the scenes. And a major thing about the game is that there was, and I think we can kind of get this vibe from just the nature of the people making it and kind of the way the game reads and all that, a toxic positivity vibe.
Yep, and I've made a video about that. The idea that you are not allowed to shit on the product, you're not allowed to criticize it, not only outside of the industry, outside of the company, but inside. So in the creative process, you're not allowed to talk about the designs. You're not allowed to, because then you get fired. So what you have are developers that just treat it like any other job. And there are developers that actually take to Twitter and tell people this. Like, I've talked to, like, what, 2? And I'm just some fucking idiot. Like, they will tell you the problems, you know, as long as you don't, you know, call or point them out. Like, they'll tell you what the fuck's happening within the industry, right? And again, grain of salt, whatever, but what they say plus what we, the gamers, see, it's like there is a correlation somewhere. And they can't hide what is happening anymore because people are seeing what is happening. And again, the whole toxic positivity thing. That was my fucking other computer. That scared the hell out of me. Whatever happened with the toxic positivity thing that we've talked about? Again, it's just this corporate ideological mindset that you're just not allowed to criticize blatantly bad designs and blatantly bad thing like anti-consumer things. Otherwise, they fire you and then they hire what? Yet another one of their ideological fucking goons into your position.
You weren't allowed to say anything, apparently internally, about this game. About how, like, something's wrong with it, character designs are not right, and so on and so forth. They really, truly believe this was Herman Hulst's baby, apparently. And he internally was himself a massive champion of the game. So it's not that. So the reason I'm telling you all of this, it's some interesting information, of course, but it's that I had said when people were like, Concord lost $200 million. Now people were pulling that money out because that's basically how much like some of the first party games like Ghost of Tsushima, The Last of Us Part 2, etc. kind of cost in that frame.
AAA games.
And I was like, there's no way that it cost that much. I was saying like it cost 9 figures probably, like low $100 million, but there's no way it cost $200 million. No, it cost $400 million. So, and I am totally solid on this source, by the way. So,
I mean, was it a $400 million loss? Is what we need to discuss. Because, yeah, it cost $400 million to make. But how much money did they get in grants? How much money did they get in investor money? How much money was purposefully set aside for this venture, right? That's what we, like, how much money did they get from invest? Like, that's what we need to really know. Was it a $400 million loss? And if so, then hell, it probably even cost more than that, because I knew it cost hundreds of $millions just based off most AAA company products. But again, is that all a loss, or is it a $200 million loss? These are the things that I don't know. I doubt they'll really say how much of it was a loss, because that's all intercompany bullshit. But that's what we really need to know.
So that's why I'm willing to share it with you, because again, I'm not really a journalist. So yeah, the big things to take away: $400 million loss. The game was in horrible
loss. Okay, so it probably was
shape as of 18 months ago before release. Not even monetization, no onboarding, most content not even there. The game was in such bad shape at that point that they spent the budget of it again in urgent outsourcing to get the game finished from all of these different angles over an 18-month period. Internally, the game was considered part of the future of PlayStation, with heavy cross-media references and a system of toxic positivity surrounding it that didn't allow anyone to meaningfully change the course of the game.
Yeah, again, because the devs, the artists, like everyone who makes the top level decisions on what they're going to push are people who probably never played a game in their life, but there's this just corporate stubbornness mindset that no, this is what we're pushing. You are going to accept this. If you don't accept this, you'll get fired, right? And when that happens, like, and you know it's going to be a bad product, again, I think that makes a bad product worse if you're just not allowed to, have the developers or have, any people who probably been at the companies for 10 plus years, 12, 15 plus years, have no say in it, right? Because that's how games used to be. The people making it, like, okay, you had maybe one, two lead designers, and you had the guys on the ground, but it was small and concise and effectively indie companies, and everyone to an extent had a say. But nowadays you don't because they're mass producing the product, so you're just a cog in a machine, and most decisions are being made above you, and you just sit there, shut the hell up, and just do your coding or do your art and do all of that.
Because if the people at the top truly believe in something, you're not going to be able to do much about that, I don't think, from the trenches.
Yeah.
So I thought people would be interested in that, and just wanted to throw that out there. That Star Wars really apparently, or I'm sorry, Star Wars. Sony really saw this as a Star Wars like project for them, like the potential to, and now it makes sense. Yeah. Not only why they spent so much money on it, but why they bought the team. So there are people there, and to me, it's unclear who exactly the people are. I know some of the names. I don't want to get too deep into that because a lot of the things I learned were off the record, but obviously this is on background. And it's like, yeah, now it makes a little more sense. You spent, and by the way, the $400 million not included in how much it cost to buy the team.
So it did cost more. Like that, like they spent the base $400 million to get it off the ground, and they probably spent even more keeping the servers up for the whole couple fucking weeks that they have been.
So yeah, so Concord is Sony's biggest released game by budget to date, and it is the biggest loss that they've ever had as a company on a project before.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised. Like, again, the interest is to make products cost more and more and more just to rake in even more money. And this idea that you can just dump money into a project and it be any better. I mean, they probably just took the money and was like, oh, okay, thanks. And because I'm pretty sure the game was made with the intent of being anti-gamer, anti-consumer. And then in came Sony. And they're like, oh, well, we can actually peddle this bull crap. But it is surprising that this is just the standard. Like, they're trying to make this the standard across the board, making a product that's not for the people who consume the product. And if that's the standard, yeah, you will have more games like Concord, right? But anyway, I mean, that's all I gotta say about this. I'm honestly not surprised. But see ya.